On this season of 60 Days In, the participants are dropping out left and right. So if you guys aren't aware what this show is, it's a show where they send like innocent people to go to a jail for 60 days to try to get intel about the jail, like the inmates, the CEOs, to tell the sheriffs so they can try to make the jail better. So these people go undercover. If they're able to complete the full 60-day program, they walk away with $60,000 in their pocket. And only 1 week into the program, and already 4 out of 7 of the participants have already dropped out. And that has resulted in the producers having to scramble around last minute, trying to figure out something in an attempt to save the program, because we're not even an eighth of the way through, and more than half the participants are no longer there. And this season, it started off a little slow because the first 5 days, all the participants have to be in a 5-day quarantine where they have to stay in their cell for 23 hours a day, and then they get out for an hour a day. And that's where it really puts these participants to the test mentally. So in this last episode, we first got to look at Steven, and he's in Pod B1. And he's a bodyguard, and he says he's worked for like several celebrities working as security, and he also has worked as a CEO in the past. But he admitted that he at times can be too confident and cocky, and he feels like that was part of his downfall as a CEO. And I feared when Steven said that he was going to have that same attitude going into this, and he probably thought it was just going to be a cakewalk, and as long as he didn't start no shit with anybody, he probably thought he'd be cool and make it through the whole 60 days. But when Steven made it to Gen Pop, the harsh reality of jail finally set in, and Steven's anxiety went through the roof once he found out that he was in this big old pod with all these dangerous inmates with not one single CO in sight to monitor all these inmates and what's going on. So Steven quickly realized that the inmates were actually the ones who were running things in this jail, and if they wanted to have a riot and take over the whole jail, they could very easily do so. And plus, with no guards, no set routine, and no structure in the pod, it's a full-fledged free-for-all in the pod, and many inmates stay up all night being loud, screaming, taking away valuable sleep from other inmates. And after going on days and days of sleep deprivation, this jail is starting to really get the best of Steven. So Steven could not take anymore. So he finally gives a distress signal by rubbing his hands together and expressing the code words, "It's getting really cold in here." So after Steven gave the distress signal, he was pulled from the pod for an interview. And I thought for sure Steven was going to vent and just go back to complete his program. I didn't think his journey was nowhere near over at all. Like, just with Coco, too, I did not see her tapping in as early as she did either. I thought she would write it out, especially with her being to prison before. So Steven expressed his concerns for his safety to the producers, telling them, like, look, there's no officers to control the pod, and if something goes south, he could be dead in a matter of seconds. And that didn't sit right with Steven. Steven couldn't get comfortable. He couldn't relax. He was constantly looking over his shoulder and on edge. So he ended up saying, look, I'm ready to tap out. So Steven only made it a week in total. He made it 5 days in quarantine and 2 days in general population before he tapped out. And Steven was really disappointed in himself for giving up only after a week. And he said no matter how much he tried to prepare himself for the program, he said nothing can fully prepare you for that. And I think a lot of the participants this season are effing around and finding that out quick. So since everyone is dropping out so early, the sheriffs decided to debrief with Steven, and they asked him for his feedback about the program. And Steven explained that he had children at home that he was missing. He said he was tired and hungry, and he said he didn't feel safe at all. So Steven revealed that the only time he got patted down while he was in jail was when he did interviews. They didn't do no shakedowns ever. They never patted him down. So Steven quickly realized, like, look, they're not patting us down, so probably every dude in here most likely has a shank on them. So the sheriffs ended up asking Steven if he saw any shanks while he was locked up, and he said he didn't physically see any shanks, but he definitely feels like they're in there. So that's another one that bites the dust. And then we have Clyde. So Clyde, he did 20 years before. So I had confidence that he might make it as well. And he came in, and the first day in, he was already having issues with his blood pressure. His blood pressure was like 154, I believe. And I think, you know, he didn't really talk about having blood pressure problems in the past. But if you do put yourself in a stressful anxiety, that can very easily raise your blood pressure as well. So during Clyde's quarantine, he was in his cell during doing his 23-hour lockdown. And he decided, you know, he used the bathroom, he flushed the toilet, and it got stuck or something, and the toilet was just flushing nonstop. It was stuck on flushing. And it just kept flushing for hours upon hours. And Clyde, he kept pushing the emergency button and letting the officers know that his toilet wouldn't stop flushing. Nobody ever came and did anything about it. And Clyde, he had to literally wrap a towel around his head to block out some of the noise because the flushing was so freaking loud. Like his whole cell was shut with the door, and we, from the cameras outside of his cell, you could hear it loud and clear. So I can't even imagine what he was going through in that cell. Like, you can't even just sit down and relax at all because you got this loud noise in the background nonstop. And that'll be sure to drive anybody crazy quick. Clyde felt like he was being tested mentally on a whole nother level than he has ever before. And after hours of nonstop flushing, one of the guards finally came to Clyde's cell and told him that his 5-day quarantine was over and to pack up things so he can be moved to the general population. So Clyde was all excited. He grabbed his things. He was ready to get out of that freaking annoying cell. So once Clyde moved to Gen Pop, as soon as he walked into Gen Pop, this man was drenched in sweat. You could tell his anxiety had hit an all-time high. And as Clyde was trying to settle into his bunk, he was getting interrogated hard by multiple inmates. They kept asking him like the same questions over and over again about his cover story. So Clyde could tell that they weren't fully buying the story he was trying to sell them. So after only 86 minutes, Clyde gave the distress signal. So after he gave the signal, he starts pacing around the pod, and he goes to the bathroom, and all of a sudden a fight breaks out between two inmates. And I wish we got to see more of the fight because they just showed like a few short clips. But that fight went on for a cool little minute, and no COs came to stop or do anything about it. So Clyde snuck outside to the yard to give the distress signal once again. And after he gave it the second time, he was pulled out not long after. And he told production that he was ready to end his journey. So Clyde was the 4th participant to drop out in the first week out of 7 participants in total. And Clyde said, like, as soon as he walked into general population, his heart immediately sank to his chest, and he said he just felt like the breath came out of him and he couldn't breathe. And Clyde felt like a failure because he thought he was going to be able to make it after doing 20 years. But he said that this jail was designed to break you, and he had major concerns for his health, which caused him to drop out of the program early. I think Clyde had too many health issues to be on a show like this in jail with minimal health care. Like, they should have vetted his health problems better. But then again, like I said at the beginning of the video, he could have just easily been having issues with his blood pressure due to the stress of him being in that environment. So to me, it seems like the men's pod is far more dangerous due to the freedom they have there, and the inmates just seem more scary. Like, compared to the female pod, yes, it looks like there's fighting here and there, but nothing like compared to the men's pod, like where you have to feel like you're constantly looking over your shoulder. So now we only have one male participant left, and that's Jamil. And he's a musician, and he's actually surprised me because he's been there for a week now, and he's been sticking through it despite him being like, a lot of people suspecting him of being the police and being on the show. So he's mostly stayed to himself in his bunk, and he's just been like chilling with a towel on his head. So there's this big inmate called V12, and you don't want to mess with V12. He's in jail for beating someone to death, and V12, he is a self-admitted hothead, and he's always testing the guards when they walk in. Like, he hovers over them, calling them all sorts of names, threatening to beat their butt. And I think he's just trying to see if they're showing any signs of weakness that he can prey on. So Jamil's in the bathroom cleaning his teeth, and B12 approaches him, and he just starts chopping it up with him. Like he's asking him if he has veneers. They start talking about like their favorite restaurants and talking about cars. And quickly, Jamil realized that him and B12 shared a lot of similar interests. B12 felt so comfortable with Jamil that he chose to give Jamil his social media information and his grandma and girlfriend's phone number so Jamil could get in touch with him and hang out with him once they both are out. And not only was Jamil excited to have a new friend, but he also felt like having B12 on his side would be beneficial because Jamil has had beef with another inmate in the pod, Drip, who accused Jamil of being the police since he doesn't have any paperwork, and he feels like the cameras are constantly following him around. So as soon as Jamil felt like he found someone he could finally confide in the pod and who could potentially have his back, all that was suddenly ripped away from him the next morning when B12 was transferred to prison. And man, I know that feeling because I've been locked up in my past as well. And when you finally make a good friend and all of a sudden they get ripped away from you and they end up getting out or they have to go to prison, it like makes you go through like a grieving process. And I can tell that's what Jamil was experiencing after B12 left. And now Jamil is back to square one where he doesn't have any friends in the pod. He feels like nobody has his back. And of course, as soon as B12 went to prison, that's when Drip started messing with Jamil once again, accusing him of being the police because he didn't have any paperwork. And Jamil claimed that he ripped his paperwork up. But 60-day producers, they gotta start doing better. Like, you gotta start giving people at least some fake paperwork. And some of these cover stories they be using, they could definitely do better. Like, I remember in my days of being locked up, if someone didn't have paperwork, then people automatically assume that you're a snitch, and that's why you don't want to show your paperwork, because you don't want to expose yourself. So, Jamil is the last male participant left, and we have 2 female participants left. We have Brittany, and we also have, what's her name, Sarah. So, Brittany's on the right. We really haven't seen too much of Brittany so far. She just got out of her 5-day quarantine where she's able to walk around the pod now. And she has a cellmate who is on Suboxone, and her cellmate was telling her, like, a lot of these girls are all mean-mugging her and feeling some type of way because she refuses to sell her Suboxone to them, and she says she's traded some Suboxone before. Like, she used to get high with her old cellmate on her Suboxone. And even though Brittany told her cellmate China that's not a good idea, it still sounds like China's most likely going to end up selling some of her Suboxone in the future. And then we have Sarah, and Sarah's like a ray of light in the jail. She is always super positive. She's giving people advice, telling people, you can turn your life around. It's not too late. I got my life together 10 years ago. And the thing is, though, the other girl participant has no idea that they have no idea that they're both participating in the program. But Brittany was quickly able to call Sarah out and say that she's got her all figured out and she knows Sarah's a part of the program because this girl is just way too happy to be in jail. And I agree. I 100% agree because there ain't no way nobody is that happy to be in jail. And it's like, when Sarah first got to the pod, one of the other inmates was starting to catch on to her, but then she's like, you know what, I believe you. And she quit bringing it up. But now Brittany has Sarah figured out. And I'm shocked nobody else has figured Sarah out either. I like Sarah, but she's got to chill because she's making it too obvious at this point because she's like treating this like she's at college on spring break or she's at summer camp for a few months. And I think that if she keeps continuing to do that, people are going to start being able to see through that. And then there ended up being a fight between 2 females. It wasn't a physical fight. They were yelling and screaming at each other. I thought it was going to get physical for a moment. It seemed like it, but then they ended up, at the last minute just screaming and going their separate ways. So at the very end of the episode, the sheriffs and the producers were scrambling because they're like, man, we only got 3 people. We're only a weekend. We still got 9 more weeks to go. So the sheriffs and producers, they ain't playing no more games. So the producers, they went and they pulled the big guns out. They found their number one top male and top female candidate that they thought would 100% be able to finish the program. They found this guy, and he has done time in prison. I can't remember the exact length. I believe he did 9 years in prison total. And then there's a female, and she seems like a really strong person. She talks about she never starts something that she doesn't finish, and I believe she said she had military background as well. I can't remember all that she said, but I just remember that whatever she said impressed me, and I was like, yes, they are not playing no more games no more, and I have faith that these people will actually be able to stick it through, and they should have picked people all like this from the very beginning. Stick with people like these two people they picked towards the end, and people like Tony and Abner in the past, who are actually going to come in and like try to get contraband and figure out where the contraband's coming from so they can actually get good intel instead of just like hanging out in their bunks the whole time. But that's it for this video, guys. Let me know your guys' thoughts about this season so far and last night's episode in the comments below. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'm also still demonetized, so if you want to support the channel, all the information is right here above. And thank you guys so much for watching.